You are certainly quite right about it. Porfiry began gaily, looking with extraordinary simplicity at Raskolnikov, which startled him and instantly put him on his guard. Certainly quite right in laughing so wittily at our legal forms, he. Some of these elaborate psychological methods are exceedingly ridiculous and perhaps useless, if one adheres too closely to the forms. Yes, I am talking of forms again. Well, if I recognize, or more strictly speaking, if I suspect someone or other to be a criminal in any case entrusted to me. You're reading for the law, of course, Rodion Romanovich. Yes, I was. Well, then it is a precedent for you for the future. Though don't suppose I should venture to instruct you after the articles you publish about crime. No, I simply make bold to state it by way of fact. If I took this man or that for a criminal, why, I ask, should I worry him prematurely, even though I had evidence against him? In one case I may be bound, for instance, to arrest a man at once, but another may be in quite a different position, so why shouldn't I let him walk about the town a bit? He. But I see you don't quite understand, so I'll give you a clearer example. If I put him in prison too soon, I may very likely give him, so to speak, moral support. You're laughing. Raskolnikov had no idea of laughing. He was sitting with compressed lips, his feverish eyes fixed on Porfiry Petrovich's. Yet that is the case with some types, especially, for men are so different. You say evidence. Well, there may be evidence, but evidence, can generally be taken two ways. I am an examining lawyer and a weak man, I confess it. I should like to make a proof, so to say, mathematically clear. I should like to make a chain of evidence such as twice 2 are 4, it ought to be a direct, irrefutable proof. And if I shut him up too soon, even though I might be convinced he was the man, I should very likely be depriving myself of the means of getting further evidence against him. And how? By giving him, so to speak, a definite position, I shall put him out of suspense and set his mind at rest, so that he will retreat into his shell. They say that at Sevastopol, soon after Alma, the clever people were in a terrible fright that the enemy would attack openly and take Sevastopol at once. But when they saw that the enemy preferred a regular siege, they were delighted, I am told, and reassured, for the thing would drag on for 2 months at least. You're laughing, you don't believe me again. Of course, you're right too. You're right. These are special cases, I admit. But you must observe this, my dear Rodion Romanovich. The general case, the case for which all legal forms and rules are intended, for which they are calculated and laid down in books, does not exist at all, for the reason that every case, every crime, for instance, so soon as it actually occurs, at once becomes a thoroughly special case, and sometimes a case unlike any that's gone before. Very comic cases of that sort sometimes occur. If I leave one man quite alone, if I don't touch him and don't worry him, but let him know or at least suspect every moment that I know all about it and am watching him day and night, and if he is in continual suspicion and terror, he'll be bound to lose his head. He'll come of himself, or maybe do something which will make it as plain as twice 2 are 4, it's delightful. It may be so with a simple peasant, but with one of our sort, an intelligent man cultivated on a certain side, it's a dead certainty. For my dear fellow, it's a very important matter to know on what side a man is cultivated. And then there are nerves, you have overlooked them. Why, they are all sick, nervous, and irritable. And then how they all suffer from spleen. That I assure you is a regular goldmine for us. And it's no anxiety to me, his running about the town free. Let him walk about for a bit. I know well enough that I've caught him and that he won't escape me. Where could he escape to, Abroad, perhaps. A Pole will escape abroad, but not here, especially as I am watching and have taken measures. Will he escape into the depths of the country, perhaps? But peasants live there, real rude Russian peasants. A modern, cultivated man would prefer prison to living with such strangers as our peasants. But that's all nonsense, and on the surface. It's not merely that he has nowhere to run to, he is psychologically unable to escape me. What an expression. Through a law of nature he can't escape me if he had anywhere to go. Have you seen a butterfly round a candle? That's how he will keep circling and circling round me. Freedom will lose its attractions. He'll begin to brood, he'll weave a tangle round himself, he'll worry himself to death. What's more, he will provide me with a mathematical proof if I only give him long enough interval. And he'll keep circling round me, getting nearer and then, flop. He'll fly straight into my mouth and I'll swallow him, and that will be very amusing, You don't believe me. Raskolnikov made no reply. He sat pale and motionless, still gazing with the same intensity into Porfiry's face. It's a lesson, he thought, turning cold. This is beyond the cat playing with a mouse, like yesterday. He can't be showing off his power with no motive. prompting me. He is far too clever for that. He must have another object. What is it? It's all nonsense, my friend. You are pretending to scare me. You've no proofs and the man I saw had no real existence. You simply want to make me lose my head, to work me up beforehand and so to crush me. But you are wrong, you won't do it. But why give me such a hint? Is he reckoning on my shattered nerves? No, my friend, you are wrong. You won't do it even though you have some trap for me. Let us see what you have in store for me. And he braced himself to face a terrible and unknown ordeal. At times he longed to fall on Porfiry and strangle him. This anger was what he dreaded from the beginning. He felt that his parched lips were flecked with foam, his heart was throbbing, but he was still determined not to speak till the right moment. He realized that this was the best policy in his position, because instead of saying too much he would be irritating his enemy by his silence and provoking him into speaking too freely. Anyhow, this was what he hoped for. No, I see you don't believe me. You think I am playing a harmless joke on you. Porfiry began again, getting more and more lively, chuckling at every instant and again pacing round the room. And to be sure you're right. God has given me a figure that can awaken none but comic ideas in other people, a buffoon. But let me tell you, and I repeat it, excuse an old man, my dear Rodion Romanovich. You are a man still young, so to say, in your first youth, and so you put intellect above everything, like all young people. Playful wit and abstract arguments fascinate you, and that's for all the world like the old Austrian Hofkriegsrath, as far as I can judge of military matters. That is, on paper they'd beaten Napoleon and taken him prisoner, and there, in their study, they worked it all out in the cleverest fashion. But, look you, General Mack surrendered with all his army, he. I see, Rodion Romanovich, you are laughing at a civilian like me, taking examples out of military history. But I can't help it, it's my weakness. I am fond of military science. And I'm ever so fond of reading all military histories. I've certainly missed my proper career. I ought to have been in the army, upon my word I ought. I shouldn't have been a Napoleon, but I might have been a major, he. Well, I'll tell you the whole truth, my dear fellow, about this special case, I mean. Actual fact and a man's temperament, my dear sir, are weighty matters, and it's astonishing how they sometimes deceive the sharpest calculation. I listened to an old man, I'm speaking seriously, Rodion Romanovich. As he said this, Porfiry Petrovich, who was scarcely 35, actually seemed to have grown old. Even his voice changed and he seemed to shrink together. Moreover, I'm a candid man. Am I a candid man or not? What do you say? I fancy I really am. I tell you these things for nothing and don't even expect a reward for it, he. Well, to proceed, wit in my opinion is a splendid thing. It is, so to say, an adornment of nature and a consolation of life, and what tricks it can play. So that it sometimes is hard for a poor examining lawyer to know where he is, especially when he's liable to be carried away by his own fancy too, for you know he is a man after all. But the poor fellow is saved by the criminal's temperament, worse luck for him. But young people carried away by their own wit don't think of that when they overstep all obstacles, as you wittily and cleverly expressed it yesterday. He will lie, that is, the man who is a special case, the incognito, and he will lie well in the cleverest fashion. You might think he would triumph and enjoy the fruits of his wit, but at the most interesting, the most flagrant moment he will faint. Of course there may be illness and a stuffy room as well, but anyway he's given us the idea. He lied incomparably, but he didn't reckon on his temperament. That's what betrays him. Another time he will be carried away by his playful wit into making fun of the man who suspects him. He will turn pale as it were on purpose to mislead. But his paleness will be too natural, too much like the real thing. Again he has given us an idea. Though his questioner may be deceived at first, he will think differently next day if he is not a fool. And of course, it is like that at every step. He puts himself forward where he is not wanted, speaks continually when he ought to keep silent, brings in all sorts of allegorical allusions, he. Comes and asks, why didn't you take me long ago? He, and that can happen, you know, with the cleverest man, the psychologist, the literary man. The temperament reflects everything like a mirror. Gaze into it and admire what you see. But why are you so pale, Rodion Romanovich? Is the room stuffy? Shall I open the window? Oh, don't trouble, please, cried Raskolnikov, and he suddenly broke into a laugh. Please don't trouble. Porfiry stood facing him, paused a moment, and suddenly he too laughed. Raskolnikov got up from the sofa, abruptly checking his hysterical laughter. Porfiry Petrovich, he began, speaking loudly and distinctly, though his legs trembled and he could scarcely stand. I see clearly at last that you actually suspect me of murdering that old woman and her sister Lizaveta. Let me tell you for my part that I am sick of this. If you find that you have a right to prosecute me legally, to arrest me, then prosecute me, arrest me. But I will not let myself be jeered at to my face and worried." His lips trembled, his eyes glowed with fury, and he could not restrain his voice. "I won't allow it," he shouted, bringing his fist down on the table. "Do you hear that, Porfiry Petrovich? I won't allow it." "Good heavens, what does it mean?" cried Porfiry Petrovich, apparently quite frightened. "Rodion Romanovich, my dear fellow, what is the matter with you?" "I won't allow it," Raskolnikov shouted again. "Hush, my dear man, they'll hear and come in. Just think, what could we say to them?" Porfiry Petrovich whispered in horror, bringing his face close to Raskolnikov's. "I won't allow it, I won't allow it," Raskolnikov repeated mechanically, but he too spoke in a sudden whisper. Porfiry turned quickly and ran to open the window. "Some fresh air, and you must have some water, my dear fellow, you're ill," and he was running to the door to call for some when he found a decanter of water in the corner. "Come, drink a little," he whispered, rushing up to him with the decanter. "It will be sure to do you good." Porfiry Petrovich's alarm and sympathy were so natural that Raskolnikov was silent and began looking at him with wild curiosity. He did not take the water, however. "Rodion Romanovich, my dear fellow, you'll drive yourself out of your mind, I assure you. Ach, have some water, do drink a little." He forced him to take the glass. Raskolnikov raised it mechanically to his lips, but set it on the table again with disgust. "Yes, you've had a little attack. You'll bring back your illness again, my dear fellow," Porfiry Petrovich cackled with friendly sympathy, though he still looked rather disconcerted. "Good heavens, you must take more care of yourself. Dmitri Prokofitch was here, came to see me yesterday. I know, I've a nasty, ironical temper, but what they made of it. Good heavens, he came yesterday after you'd been. We dined and he talked away, and I could only throw up my hands in despair. Did he come from you? But do sit down, for mercy's sake, sit down." "No, not from me, but I knew he went to you, and why he went," Raskolnikov answered sharply. "You knew?" "I knew, what of it?" "Why this, Rodion Romanovich, that I know more than that about you. I know about everything. I know how you went to take a flat at night when it was dark, and how you rang the bell and asked about the blood, so that the workman and the porter did not know what to make of it. Yes, I understand your state of mind at that time, but you'll drive yourself mad like that, upon my word. You'll lose your head. You're full of generous indignation at the wrongs you've received, first from destiny, and then from the police officers, and so you rush from one thing to another to force them to speak out and make an end of it all, because you are sick of all this suspicion and foolishness. That's so, isn't it? I have guessed how you feel, haven't I? Only in that way you'll lose your head, and Razumihin too. He's too good a man for such a position, you must know that. You are ill and he is good, and your illness is infectious for him. I'll tell you about it when you are more yourself. But do sit down, for goodness sake. Please rest, you look shocking, do sit down." Raskolnikov sat down. He no longer shivered, he was hot all over. In amazement he listened with strained attention to Porfiry Petrovich, who still seemed frightened as he looked after him with friendly solicitude. But he did not believe a word he said, though he felt a strange inclination to believe. Porfiry's unexpected words about the flat had utterly overwhelmed him. "How can it be, he knows about the flat then," he thought suddenly, "and he tells it me himself." Yes, in our legal practice there was a case almost exactly similar, a case of morbid psychology. Porfiry went on quickly. A man confessed to murder and how he kept it up. It was a regular hallucination. He brought forward facts. He imposed upon everyone and why. He had been partly, but only partly, unintentionally the cause of a murder, and when he knew that he had given the murderers the opportunity, he sank into dejection. It got on his mind and turned his brain. He began imagining things, and he persuaded himself that he was the murderer. But at last, the High Court of Appeal went into it, and the poor fellow was acquitted and put under proper care. Thanks to the Court of Appeal. Tut tut tut. Why, my dear fellow, you may drive yourself into delirium if you have the impulse to work upon your nerves, to go ringing bells at night and asking about blood. I've studied all this morbid psychology in my practice. A man is sometimes tempted to jump out of a window or from a belfry. Just the same with bell ringing. It's all illness, Rodion Romanovich. You have begun to neglect your illness. You should consult an experienced doctor. What's the good of that, fat fellow? You are lightheaded. You were delirious when you did all this. For a moment, Raskolnikov felt everything going round. Is it possible, flashed through his mind, that he is still lying? He can't be. He rejected that idea, feeling to what a degree of fury it might drive him, feeling that that fury might drive him mad. I was not delirious. I knew what I was doing, he cried, straining every faculty to penetrate Porfiry's game. I was quite myself, do you hear? Yes, I hear and understand. You said yesterday you were not delirious, you were particularly emphatic about it. I understand all you can tell me. Ach, listen, Rodion Romanovich, my dear fellow. If you were actually a criminal, or were somehow mixed up in this damnable business, would you insist that you were not delirious but in full possession of your faculties? And so emphatically and persistently, would it be possible, quite impossible to my thinking? If you had anything on your conscience, you certainly ought to insist that you were delirious. That's so, isn't it? There was a note of slyness in this inquiry. Raskolnikov drew back on the sofa as Porfiry bent over him and stared in silent perplexity at him. Another thing about Razumihin, you certainly ought to have said that he came of his own accord to have concealed your part in it. But you don't conceal it. You lay stress on his coming at your instigation. Raskolnikov had not done so. A chill went down his back. You keep telling lies, he said slowly and weakly, twisting his lips into a sickly smile. You are trying again to show that you know all my game, that you know all I shall say beforehand, he said, conscious himself that he was not weighing his words as he ought. You want to frighten me, or you are simply laughing at me. He still stared at him as he said this, and again, there was a light of intense hatred in his eyes. You keep lying, he said. You know perfectly well that the best policy for the criminal is to tell the truth as nearly as possible, to conceal as little as possible. I don't believe you. What a wily person you are, Porfiry tittered. There's no catching you, you've a perfect monomania. So you don't believe me. But still you do believe me, you believe a quarter. I'll soon make you believe the whole because I have a sincere liking for you and genuinely wish you good. Raskolnikov's lips trembled. Yes, I do, went on Porfiry, touching Raskolnikov's arm genially. You must take care of your illness. Besides, your mother and sister are here now. You must think of them. You must soothe and comfort them, and you do nothing but frighten them. What has that to do with you? How do you know it? What concern is it of yours? You are keeping watch on me and want to let me know it. Good heavens, why I learned it all from you yourself. You don't notice that in your excitement you tell me and others everything. From Razumihin too, I learned a number of interesting details yesterday. No, you interrupted me, but I must tell you that, for all your wit, your suspiciousness makes you lose the common-sense view of things. To return to bell-ringing, for instance, I, an examining lawyer, have betrayed a precious thing like that. A real fact, for it is a fact worth having. And you see nothing in it. Why, if I had the slightest suspicion of you, should I have acted like that? No, I should first have disarmed your suspicions, and not let you see I knew of that fact. Should have diverted your attention, and suddenly have dealt you a knockdown blow, your expression saying, "And what were you doing, sir, pray, at 10 or nearly 11 at the murdered woman's flat? And why did you ring the bell, and why did you ask about blood? And why did you invite the porters to go with you to the police station, to the lieutenant? That's how I ought to have acted if I had a grain of suspicion of you. I ought to have taken your evidence in due form, searched your lodging and perhaps have arrested you too. So I have no suspicion of you, since I have not done that. But you can't look at it normally and you see nothing, I say again." Raskolnikov started so that Porfiry Petrovich could not fail to perceive it. "You are lying all the while," he cried. "I don't know your object, but you are lying. You did not speak like that just now, and I cannot be mistaken." "I am lying," Porfiry repeated, apparently incensed, but preserving a good-humored and ironical face, as though he were not in the least concerned at Raskolnikov's opinion of him. "I am lying. But how did I treat you just now, I the examining lawyer? Prompting you and giving you every means for your defense. Illness, I said, delirium, injury, melancholy, and the police officers and all the rest of it. Ah, he. Though indeed, all those psychological means of defense are not very reliable and cut both ways. Illness, delirium, I don't remember. That's all right. But why, my good sir, in your illness and in your delirium were you haunted by just those delusions and not by any others? There may have been others, he. Raskolnikov looked haughtily and contemptuously at him. Briefly, he said loudly and imperiously, rising to his feet, and in so doing pushing Porfiry back a little. Briefly, I want to know, do you acknowledge me perfectly free from suspicion or not? Tell me, Porfiry Petrovich, tell me once for all and make haste. What a business I'm having with you. cried Porfiry with a perfectly good-humored, sly, and composed face. "And why do you want to know? Why do you want to know so much, since they haven't begun to worry you? Why, you are like a child asking for matches. And why are you so uneasy? Why do you force yourself upon us, eh, he? I repeat," Raskolnikov cried furiously, "that I can't put up with it." "With what uncertainty?" interrupted Porfiry. "Don't jeer at me, I won't have it, I tell you I won't have it. I can't and I won't, do you hear, do you hear?" he shouted, bringing his fist down on the table again. "Hush, hush, they'll overhear. I warn you seriously, take care of yourself." "I am not joking," Porfiry whispered, but this time there was not the look of old womanish good nature and alarm in his face. Now he was peremptory, stern, frowning, and for once laying aside all mystification. But this was only for an instant. Raskolnikov, bewildered, suddenly fell into actual frenzy, but strange to say, he again obeyed the command to speak quietly, though he was in a perfect paroxysm of fury. "I will not allow myself to be tortured," he whispered, instantly recognizing with hatred that he could not help obeying the command and driven to even greater fury by the thought. "Arrest me, search me, but kindly act in due form and don't play with me. Don't dare." "Don't worry about the form," Porfiry interrupted with the same sly smile, as it were, gloating with enjoyment over Raskolnikov. "I invited you to see me quite in a friendly way. I don't want your friendship and I spit on it. Do you hear? And here I take my cap and go. What will you say now if you mean to arrest me?" He took up his cap and went to the door. "And won't you see my little surprise?" chuckled Porfiry, again taking him by the arm and stopping him at the door. He seemed to become more playful and good-humored, which maddened Raskolnikov. "What surprise?" he asked, standing still and looking at Porfiry in alarm. "My little surprise, it's sitting there behind the door, he. He pointed to the locked door. I locked him in that he should not escape." "What is it, where what?" Raskolnikov walked to the door and would have opened it, but it was locked. "It's locked, here is the key." And he brought a key out of his pocket. "You are lying," roared Raskolnikov without restraint. "You lie, you damned Punchinello." And he rushed at Porfiry, who retreated to the other door, not at all alarmed. "I understand it all. You are lying and mocking so that I may betray myself to you." "Why, you could not betray yourself any further, my dear Rodion Romanovitch. You are in a passion. Don't shout, I shall call the clerks." "You are lying, call the clerks. You knew I was ill and tried to work me into a frenzy to make me betray myself, that was your object. Produce your facts, I understand it all. You've no evidence, you have only wretched rubbishly suspicions like Zamatov's. You knew my character, you wanted to drive me to fury and then to knock me down with priests and deputies. Are you waiting for them? Eh, what are you waiting for? Where are they? Produce them." "Why deputies, my good man? What things people will imagine. And to do so would not be acting in form as you say, you don't know the business, my dear fellow. And there's no escaping form, as you see," Porfiry muttered, listening at the door through which a noise could be heard. "Ah, they're coming," cried Raskolnikov. "You've sent for them, you expected them. Well, produce them all, your deputies, your witnesses, what you like. I am ready." But at this moment, a strange incident occurred, something so unexpected that neither Raskolnikov nor Porfiry Petrovich could have looked for such a conclusion to their interview. Chapter 6. When he remembered the scene afterwards, this is how Raskolnikov saw it. The noise behind the door increased, and suddenly the door was opened a little. "What is it?" cried Porfiry Petrovich, annoyed. "Why, I gave orders." For an instant there was no answer, but it was evident that there were several persons at the door, and that they were apparently pushing somebody back. "What is it?" Porfiry Petrovich repeated, uneasily. "The prisoner Nikolay has been brought," someone answered. "He is not wanted, take him away, let him wait. What's he doing here, how irregular," cried Porfiry, rushing to the door. "But he," began the same voice and suddenly ceased. 2 seconds, not more, were spent in actual struggle, then someone gave a violent shove, and then a man, very pale, strode into the room. This man's appearance was at first sight very strange. He stared straight before him, as though seeing nothing. There was a determined gleam in his eyes. At the same time there was a deathly pallor in his face, as though he were being led to the scaffold. His white lips were faintly twitching. He was dressed like a workman and was of medium height, very young, slim, his hair cut in round crop, with thin spare features. The man whom he had thrust back followed him into the room and succeeded in seizing him by the shoulder. He was a warder, but Nikolay pulled his arm away. Several persons crowded inquisitively into the doorway. Some of them tried to get in. All this took place almost instantaneously. "Go away, it's too soon. Wait till you are sent for. Why have you brought him so soon?" Porfiry Petrovich muttered, extremely annoyed and as it were thrown out of his reckoning. But Nikolay suddenly knelt down. "What's the matter?" cried Porfiry, surprised. "I am guilty, mine is the sin. I am the murderer," Nikolay articulated suddenly, rather breathless but speaking fairly loudly. For 10 seconds there was silence as though all had been struck dumb. Even the warder stepped back, mechanically retreated to the door, and stood immovable. "What is it?" cried Porfiry Petrovich, recovering from his momentary stupefaction. "I am the murderer," repeated Nikolay after a brief pause. "What, you, what? Whom did you kill?" Porfiry Petrovich was obviously bewildered. Nikolay again was silent for a moment. "Alyona Ivanovna and her sister Lizaveta Ivanovna, I killed, with an axe. Darkness came over me," he added suddenly and was again silent. He still remained on his knees. Porfiry Petrovich stood for some moments as though meditating, but suddenly roused himself and waved back the uninvited spectators. They instantly vanished and closed the door. Then he looked towards Raskolnikov, who was standing in the corner, staring wildly at Nikolay, and moved towards him, but stopped short, looked from Nikolay to Raskolnikov and then again at Nikolay, and seeming unable to restrain himself darted at the latter. "You're in too great a hurry," he shouted at him, almost angrily. "I didn't ask you what came over you. Speak, did you kill them?" "I am the murderer. I want to give evidence," Nikolay pronounced. "Ach, what did you kill them with?" "An axe, I had it ready." "Ach, he is in a hurry, alone." Nikolay did not understand the question. "Did you do it alone?" "Yes, alone, and Mitka is not guilty and had no share in it." "Don't be in a hurry about Mitka. Ach, how was it you ran downstairs like that at the time the porters met you both?" "It was to put them off the scent. I ran after Mitka," Nikolay replied hurriedly, as though he had prepared the answer. "I knew it," cried Porfiry with vexation. "It's not his own tale he is telling," he muttered as though to himself, and suddenly his eyes rested on Raskolnikov again. He was apparently so taken up with Nikolay that for a moment he had forgotten Raskolnikov. He was a little taken aback. "My dear Rodion Romanovich, excuse me." He flew up to him. "This won't do, I'm afraid you must go. It's no good you're staying. I will, you see, what a surprise. Goodbye." And taking him by the arm, he showed him to the door. "I suppose you didn't expect it," said Raskolnikov, who, though he had not yet fully grasped the situation, had regained his courage. "You did not expect it either, my friend. See how your hand is trembling, hee. You're trembling, too, Porfiry Petrovich." "Yes, I am, I didn't expect it." They were already at the door. Porfiry was impatient for Raskolnikov to be gone. "And your little surprise, aren't you going to show it to me?" Raskolnikov said sarcastically. Why his teeth are chattering as he asks, hee. "You are an ironical person. Come till we meet. I believe we can say goodbye." "That's in God's hands," muttered Porfiry with an unnatural smile. As he walked through the office, Raskolnikov noticed that many people were looking at him. Among them he saw the 2 porters from the house, whom he had invited that night to the police station. They stood there waiting, but he was no sooner on the stairs than he heard the voice of Porfiry Petrovich behind him. Turning round, he saw the latter running after him, out of breath. "One word, Rodion Romanovich. As to all the rest, it's in God's hands, but as a matter of form there are some questions I shall have to ask you. So we shall meet again, shan't we?" And Porfiry stood still, facing him with a smile. "Shan't we?" he added again. He seemed to want to say something more, but could not speak out. "You must forgive me, Porfiry Petrovich, for what has just passed. I lost my temper," began Raskolnikov, who had so far regained his courage that he felt irresistibly inclined to display his coolness. Don't mention it, Porfiry replied almost gleefully. "I myself too, I have a wicked temper, I admit it, but we shall meet again. If it's God's will, we may see a great deal of one another. And we'll get to know each other through and through, added Raskolnikov. Yes, know each other through and through, assented Porfiry Petrovich, and he screwed up his eyes, looking earnestly at Raskolnikov. Now you're going to a birthday party. To a funeral. Of course, the funeral. Take care of yourself and get well. I don't know what to wish you, said Raskolnikov, who had begun to descend the stairs but looked back again. I should like to wish you success, but your office is such a comical one. Why comical? Porfiry Petrovich had turned to go, but he seemed to prick up his ears at this. Why, how you must have been torturing and harassing that poor Nikolay psychologically, after your fashion, till he confessed. You must have been at him day and night, proving to him that he was the murderer, and now that he has confessed, you'll begin vivisecting him again. You are lying, you'll say. You are not the murderer, you can't be, it's not your own tale you are telling. You must admit it's a comical business. He. You noticed then that I said to Nikolay just now that it was not his own tale he was telling. How could I help noticing it? You are quick-witted, you notice everything, you've really a playful mind, and you always fasten on the comic side. They say that was the marked characteristic of Gogol among the writers. Yes, of Gogol. Yes, of Gogol, I shall look forward to meeting you. So shall I. Raskolnikov walked straight home. He was so muddled and bewildered that on getting home he sat for a quarter of an hour on the sofa, trying to collect his thoughts. He did not attempt to think about Nikolay, he was stupefied. He felt that his confession was something inexplicable, amazing, something beyond his understanding. But Nikolay's confession was an actual fact. The consequences of this fact were clear to him at once. Its falsehood could not fail to be discovered, and then they would be after him again. Till then, at least, he was free and must do something for himself, for the danger was imminent. But how imminent? His position gradually became clear to him. Remembering, sketchily, the main outlines of his recent scene with Porfiry, he could not help shuddering again with horror. Of course, he did not yet know all Porfiry's aims, he could not see into all his calculations. But he had already partly shown his hand, and no one knew better than Raskolnikov how terrible Porfiry's lead had been for him. A little more and he might have given himself away completely, circumstantially. Knowing his nervous temperament, and from the first glance seeing through him, Porfiry, though playing a bold game, was bound to win. There's no denying that Raskolnikov had compromised himself seriously, but no facts had come to light as yet. There was nothing positive. But was he taking a true view of the position? Wasn't he mistaken? What had Porfiry been trying to get at? Had he really some surprise prepared for him? And what was it? Had he really been expecting something or not? How would they have parted if it had not been for the unexpected appearance of Nikolay? Porfiry had shown almost all his cards, of course. He had risked something in showing them, and if he had really had anything up his sleeve, Raskolnikov reflected, he would have shown that too. What was that surprise? Was it a joke? Had it meant anything? Could it have concealed anything like a fact, a piece of positive evidence? His yesterday's visitor, what had become of him? Where was he today? If Porfiry really had any evidence, it must be connected with him. He sat on the sofa with his elbows on his knees and his face hidden in his hands. He was still shivering nervously. At last he got up, took his cap, thought a minute, and went to the door. He had a sort of presentiment that for today, at least, he might consider himself out of danger. He had a sudden sense almost of joy. He wanted to make haste to Katerina Ivanovna's. He would be too late for the funeral, of course, but he would be in time for the memorial dinner, and there, at once he would see Sonya. He stood still, thought a moment, and a suffering smile came for a moment onto his lips. Today, he repeated to himself. Yes, today, so it must be. But as he was about to open the door, it began opening of itself. He started and moved back. The door opened gently and slowly, and there suddenly appeared a figure, yesterday's visitor from underground. The man stood in the doorway, looked at Raskolnikov without speaking, and took a step forward into the room. He was exactly the same as yesterday, the same figure, the same dress, but there was a great change in his face. He looked dejected and sighed deeply. If he had only put his hand up to his cheek and leaned his head on one side, he would have looked exactly like a peasant woman. "What do you want?" asked Raskolnikov, numb with terror. The man was still silent, but suddenly he bowed down almost to the ground, touching it with his finger. "What is it?" cried Raskolnikov. I have sinned, the man articulated softly. How? By evil thoughts. They looked at one another. I was vexed. When you came, perhaps in drink, and bade the porters go to the police station and asked about the blood, I was vexed that they let you go and took you for drunken. I was so vexed that I lost my sleep. And remembering the address, we came here yesterday and asked for you. Who came? Raskolnikov interrupted, instantly beginning to recollect. I did. I've wronged you. Then you come from that house. I was standing at the gate with them. Don't you remember? We have carried on our trade in that house for years past. We cure and prepare hides, we take work home. Most of all I was vexed. And the whole scene of the day before yesterday in the gateway came clearly before Raskolnikov's mind. He recollected that there had been several people there besides the porters, women among them. He remembered one voice had suggested taking him straight to the police station. He could not recall the face of the speaker, and even now he did not recognize it, but he remembered that he had turned round and made him some answer. So this was the solution of yesterday's horror. The most awful thought was that he had been actually almost lost, had almost done for himself on account of such a trivial circumstance. So this man could tell nothing except his asking about the flat and the blood stains. So Porfiry too had nothing but that delirium, no facts but this psychology which cuts both ways, nothing positive. So if no more facts come to light, and they must not. Then what can they do to him? How can they convict him, even if they arrest him? And Porfiry then had only just heard about the flat and had not known about it before. Was it you who told Porfiry that I'd been there? He cried, struck by a sudden idea. What Porfiry? The head of the detective department. Yes, the porters did not go there, but I went. Today. I got there 2 minutes before you, and I heard it all, how he worried you. Where, what, when? Why, in the next room. I was sitting there all the time. What, why, then you were the surprise, but how could it happen, upon my word? I saw that the porters did not want to do what I said, began the man. For it's too late, said they, and maybe he'll be angry that we did not come at the time. I was vexed and I lost my sleep, and I began making inquiries, and finding out yesterday where to go, I went today. The first time I went he wasn't there, when I came an hour later he couldn't see me. I went the third time and they showed me in. I informed him of everything, just as it happened, and he began skipping about the room and punching himself on the chest. What do you scoundrels mean by it? If I'd known about it I should have arrested him. Then he ran out, called somebody and began talking to him in the corner, then he turned to me, scolding and questioning me. He scolded me a great deal, and I told him everything, and I told him that you didn't dare to say a word in answer to me yesterday and that you didn't recognize me, and he fell to running about again and kept hitting himself on the chest, and getting angry and running about, and when you were announced he told me to go into the next room. Sit there a bit, he said, don't move whatever you may hear, and he set a chair there for me and locked me in. Perhaps, he said, I may call you. And when Nikola'd been brought he let me out as soon as you were gone. I shall send for you again and question you, he said. And did he question Nikolai while you were there? He got rid of me as he did of you, before he spoke to Nikolai. The man stood still, and again suddenly bowed down, touching the ground with his finger. Forgive me for my evil thoughts and my slander. May God forgive you, answered Raskolnikov. And as he said this, the man bowed down again, but not to the ground, turned slowly and went out of the room. It all cuts both ways, now it all cuts both ways, repeated Raskolnikov, and he went out more confident than ever. Now we'll make a fight for it, he said, with a malicious smile as he went down the stairs. His malice was aimed at himself. With shame and contempt he recollected his cowardice. Part 5. Chapter 1. The morning that followed the fateful interview with Dounia and her mother brought sobering influences to bear on Fyodor Petrovich. Intensely unpleasant as it was, he was forced little by little to accept, as a fact beyond recall, what had seemed to him only the day before fantastic and incredible. The black snake of wounded vanity had been gnawing at his heart all night. When he got out of bed, Fyodor Petrovich immediately looked in the looking-glass. He was afraid that he had jaundice. However, his health seemed unimpaired so far, and looking at his noble, clear-skinned countenance which had grown fattish of late, Fyodor Petrovich for an instant was positively comforted in the conviction that he would find another bride, and perhaps even a better one. But coming back to the sense of his present position, he turned aside and spat vigorously, which excited a sarcastic smile in Andrei Semyonovich Lebeziatnikov, the young friend with whom he was staying. That smile Fyodor Petrovich noticed, and at once set it down against his young friend's account. He had set down a good many points against him of late. His anger was redoubled when he reflected that he ought not to have told Andrei Semyonovich about the result of yesterday's interview. That was the second mistake he had made in temper, through impulsiveness and irritability. Moreover, all that morning one unpleasantness followed another. He even found a hitch awaiting him in his legal case in the Senate. He was particularly irritated by the owner of the flat, which had been taken in view of his approaching marriage, and was being redecorated at his own expense. The owner, a rich German tradesman, would not entertain the idea of breaking the contract which had just been signed and insisted on the full forfeit money, though Fyodor Petrovich would be giving him back the flat practically redecorated. In the same way, the upholsterers refused to return a single ruble of the installment paid for the furniture purchased, but not yet removed to the flat. Am I to get married simply for the sake of the furniture? Fyodor Petrovich ground his teeth, and at the same time once more he had a gleam of desperate hope. Can all that be really so irrevocably over? Is it no use to make another effort? The thought of Dounia sent a voluptuous pang through his heart. He endured anguish at that moment, and if it had been possible to slay Raskolnikov instantly by wishing it, Fyodor Petrovich would promptly have uttered the wish. It was my mistake, too, not to have given them money, he thought, as he returned dejectedly to Lebeziatnikov's room. And why on earth was I such a Jew? It was false economy. I meant to keep them without a penny so that they should turn to me as their providence and look at them. Phoo! If I'd spent some 1,500 rubles on them for the trousseau and presents, on knickknacks, dressing cases, jewelry, materials, and all that sort of trash from Knopp's and the English shop, my position would have been better and stronger. They could not have refused me so easily. They are the sort of people that would feel bound to return money and presents if they broke it off, and they would find it hard to do it. And their conscience would prick them. How can we dismiss a man who has hitherto been so generous and delicate? I've made a blunder. And grinding his teeth again, Fyodor Petrovich called himself a fool, but not aloud, of course. He returned home, twice as irritated and angry as before. The preparations for the funeral dinner at Katerina Ivanovna's excited his curiosity as he passed. He had heard about it the day before. He fancied, indeed, that he had been invited, but absorbed in his own cares, he had paid no attention. Inquiring of Madame Lipovetsel, who was busy laying the table while Katerina Ivanovna was away at the cemetery, he heard that the entertainment was to be a great affair, that all the lodgers had been invited, among them some who had not known the dead man, that even Andrei Semyonovich Lebeziatnikov was invited in spite of his previous quarrel with Katerina Ivanovna, that he, Fyodor Petrovich, was not only invited, but was eagerly expected as he was the most important of the lodgers. Amalia Ivanovna herself had been invited with great ceremony in spite of the recent unpleasantness, and so she was very busy with preparations and was taking a positive pleasure in them. She was moreover dressed up to the nines, all in new black silk, and she was proud of it. All this suggested an idea to Fyodor Petrovich, and he went into his room, or rather Lebeziatnikov's, somewhat thoughtful. He had learnt that Raskolnikov was to be one of the guests. Andrei Semyonovich had been at home all the morning. The attitude of Fyodor Petrovich to this gentleman was strange, though perhaps natural. Fyodor Petrovich had despised and hated him from the day he came to stay with him, and at the same time he seemed somewhat afraid of him. He had not come to stay with him on his arrival in Petersburg simply from parsimony, though that had been perhaps his chief object. He had heard of Andrei Semyonovich, who had once been his ward, as a leading young progressive who was taking an important part in certain interesting circles, the doings of which were a legend in the provinces. It had impressed Fyodor Petrovich. These powerful omniscient circles who despised everyone and showed everyone up had long inspired in him a peculiar but quite vague alarm. He had not, of course, been able to form even an approximate notion of what they meant. He, like everyone, had heard that there were, especially in Petersburg, progressives of some sort, nihilists and so on, and like many people, he exaggerated and distorted the significance of those words to an absurd degree. What for many years past he had feared more than anything was being shown up, and this was the chief ground for his continual uneasiness, at the thought of transferring his business to Petersburg. He was afraid of this, as little children are sometimes panic-stricken. Some years before, when he was just entering on his own career, he had come upon two cases in which rather important personages in the province, patrons of his, had been cruelly shown up. One instance had ended in great scandal for the person attacked, and the other had very nearly ended in serious trouble. For this reason, Fyodor Petrovich intended to go into the subject as soon as he reached Petersburg, and, if necessary, to anticipate contingencies by seeking the favor of our younger generation. He relied on Andrei Semyonovich for this, and before his visit to Raskolnikov, he had succeeded in picking up some current phrases. He soon discovered that Andrei Semyonovich was a commonplace simpleton, but that by no means reassured Fyodor Petrovich. Even if he had been certain that all the progressives were fools like him, it would not have allayed his uneasiness. All the doctrines, the ideas, the systems, with which Andrei Semyonovich pestered him had no interest for him. He had his own object, he simply wanted to find out at once what was happening here. Had these people any power or not? Had he anything to fear from them? Would they expose any enterprise of his? And what precisely was now the object of their attacks? Could he somehow make up to them and get round them if they really were powerful? Was this the thing to do or not? Couldn't he gain something through them? In fact, hundreds of questions presented themselves.